You know, pretty much every country in the world has lines on a map that it calls its own. But there's one exception. Today, we're going to dive into how this one country's undefined borders are actually deeply connected to the story of modern immigration. It's a real puzzle, so let's get into it.
So let that sink in for a second. I mean, we hear about border disputes all the time, right? But that's countries arguing over where a line should be. This is something else entirely. We're talking about a country that has, for its whole history, basically refused to draw the line in the first place. Super different.
And that country is Israel. But, the interesting part isn't just the what, it's the why. So to really get why they do this, why they keep things so undefined, we have to look at one of the most powerful forces that has shaped the country from day one, immigration. Okay, so our story really kicks off with people moving. In Israel, there's a specific term for Jewish immigration. It's called aliyah, which means ascent. And you're going to see that the way aliyah has changed over the years, well, it's pretty much the key to unlocking this whole thing. So if you look back at the early days, say the first 20 years or so, things were pretty balanced. You had about half the immigrants coming from Europe and the Americas, and the other half coming from nearby Muslim countries. But then, the 1990s happened. The Soviet Union collapses, and boom, the floodgates just open. This brought in a massive wave of people that completely changed the demographic makeup of the country. And the result of that shift? It's really stark when you look at it. What used to be this 50-50 split is now overwhelmingly a flow of people from the West and former Soviet states. And it's so important to get this because who these new immigrants are, well, that's what powers the next chapter of this story. Okay, so you might be asking, why does it matter where they came from? Well, it matters a whole lot. Because this new wave of people didn't just show up and find a place to live in a vacuum. Nope. They became a really critical piece of what our source material describes as an expansion cycle. And what's the fuel for this cycle? Well, a huge part of it is money and political backing. We're talking about over $3.8 billion, billion with a B, in aid that Israel gets from the U.S. every single year. That consistent support is the foundation for everything that follows. So here's how the loop works, according to the source. The U.S. support helps pay for building new settlements. Okay, so now you have all these new houses. Well, they need people. That creates a demand for new immigrants. Then the new immigrants arrive and move into these settlements. And that creates, demographic pressure to expand and build even more. It just feeds on itself, a classic feedback loop. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. A really recent and, of course, tragic event put this whole cycle on full display. The war in Ukraine. So on the one hand, the war in Ukraine created this terrible humanitarian crisis, and Israel absolutely provided a lifeline for tens of thousands of Jewish refugees. That's one reality. But according to the sources we're looking at, there's another reality happening at the exact same time. This influx of people was also seen as an opportunity, a chance to bring in new immigrants to populate settlements and advance this idea of a greater Israel. So you have these two things happening at once, born from the same tragedy. And this quote right here just cuts right to the heart of this whole thing. Imagine you're a refugee from Ukraine. For you, getting to a new home, even in a settlement, is about survival. It's safety. It's a new beginning. But then, from the Palestinian perspective, that same new life, that same home, might be the very thing that means their displacement. It's this incredible paradox where one person's search for safety can directly lead to another's loss. Okay, and this is where all the pieces of the puzzle, the immigration, the settlements, the foreign aid, this is where they all click into place. It brings us right back to that very first question we started with. What's the deal with Israel's borders? Think about it. Almost every other country says, here are our borders. Even if their neighbors disagree and they fight about it for years, they still put a line on the map. It's how international law works. But Israel's approach is completely different. They deliberately don't draw a line. And the argument from our source material is that this isn't just some oversight, it's a very intentional strategy. And that strategy has a name, strategic ambiguity. It's a powerful idea. I mean, if you never draw the border in permanent ink, you can always redraw it, right? It gives you the flexibility to let the facts on the ground, like where new settlements are built, constantly push out and redefine where the country's unofficial or de facto border really is. So let's just recap the whole argument here. You've got immigration, now mostly from the West. You've got U.S. aid providing the financial backing. Together, those things fuel the expansion of settlements. We saw how global crises like the war in Ukraine can actually speed this up. And what's the one thing that makes it all possible? It's that core policy of keeping the borders undeclared. That's the mechanism that allows this process to just keep going, indefinitely. And all of this leaves us with a really tough, fundamental question to think about. What happens when one people's legitimate search for safety and a new life becomes tangled up with another people's loss and dispossession? It's a question that really gets to the core of this entire, incredibly complex situation, and as you can probably tell, there are no easy answers.